Oddball Show features content intended for mature audiences. If you'd like to view a content warning before listening, please check out the episode description. The views put forth by our hosts and our guest reflect the speaker's opinions and not the official stance of Oddball Foundation. Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoy the show.
Hey everybody, it's Jason Wright from Oddball Show. I'm so excited to welcome Sasha DeBrule back to Oddball Show. Sasha is a Los Angeles-based therapist and counselor where he uses an approach called transformative mutual aid practices, also a co-founder of a group called the Icarus Project and a current advisor to the Institute for the Development of Human Arts, or IDA. Sasha, welcome back to Oddball Show. It's been a while.
Yeah, great to be here. Thanks,
hey, last time we talked was 2020, I believe.
Yeah, it was in the middle of the pandemic.
It was the middle of the pandemic. Yeah. How are things going since the pandemic for you?
Well, I mean, the wild thing in my life is that like probably right around the time that we did that interview, I met this really cool woman and then got her pregnant, and now we have twins and we have like 21-month-old twins.
Oh, congratulations. Yeah. I mean, as you know, well, I don't know if we've talked, off, through email and stuff. I have a daughter now, Emerson, who is 9 months. She'll be in 8 days, she'll be 10 months old. Crazy. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I feel like you're just a little bit ahead of me with like all the life stuff that's happening. So
yeah, man. It only gets more exciting. It only gets more exciting from 10
So
months.
My daughter is currently she's sort of standing up a little bit, which is pretty cool, and doing a lot of crawling all over the place. Definitely getting into stuff. She really likes, I don't know if you can relate to this, but a lot of wires, a lot of electronics for sure. That's what she seems to find whenever she's crawling around. So at 21 months, what are your kids doing that is interesting? And by the way, what are your kids' names again? I know you have a blog about them, but what are they?
Lila and Tyler.
Lila and Tyler. Okay.
We have a girl child and a boy child, and I mean,
well, congratulations, because that's like what people want. People want the boy and the girl.
Oh yeah, I wasn't even thinking about that was like a way too scary prospect, the thought of having children. So
how did you get twins? Wow. Congratulations.
It just happened.
That's great. I know. Have you ever heard of a story of someone's like, I want a boy and they have a girl. I want a boy and I have a girl. I want a boy, I have a girl. It's just, but like you got the boy and the girl. That's great. My brother has the boy and the girl. My friend has the boy and the girl. I have a girl who I actually adore. And then maybe I should go again and have a boy. But you did it right away. Boy and girl. You nailed it. You're good. You're good. You're golden. That's great.
The beauty of it is just like the love, like it's intense. It's a lot of work, but there's so much love.
And, I can see it. I can see it when you talk. I can definitely see it.
I look at my eye. Yeah, I feel like everything is, a big part of my relationship with my kids is that I'm constantly playing the music and we're constantly dancing and singing and just love songs take on this whole different meaning.
Yeah. I felt like that when I first listened to Stevie Wonder after Emerson was born, and there's a song by Stevie Wonder that says, for once in my life, I got something to live for. That song, someone who needs me now. So I was like, I wonder if he's talking about a kid when he's writing, because I don't know, I don't know if that's a love song. I feel like that's a song towards a son or a daughter. So I feel like, so when I heard that song,
I know that song. We listen to a lot of Stevie Wonder in my household. I feel like there's all the cliched stuff about the kind of love that comes from having a child, and the way that you end up being the love that is different than any other kind of love. But I'll tell you something, man, and this just comes from being like I was a really unhappy kid. I mean, I was obviously like, I said I was a happy kid, but like I had a lot of unhappiness in my childhood, and definitely as a teenager, I was like really um I was really pissed about being brought into this world. Like
Yeah.
I was really angry at my mom, frankly, for having me. And so that those are youthful experiences informed for me for years, like the kind of this, I don't know, animosity I almost had towards like parents, like, oh, so you're gonna have this kid so that this kid just like loves you and doesn't have any choice in the matter? Like, what the fuck? Like
Yeah, right.
and I feel like I'm all of that is informing me as I have these kids, and
Yeah, yeah,
I feel like I get something about the human experience that I didn't get before. And also at the same time, I do see there's this way that there's a lot of people who have children because they're trying to fill some hole in their life. Um, like you said, I'm a therapist and I'm constantly, talking to people. I'm either talking to individuals about the stuff that happened to them when they were kids, or I'm talking to families, about
yeah,
the dynamics that they have. And I think, you know, it is an incredible responsibility to bring children into this world, and it's like behooves us as fathers
yeah.
to understand the dynamics that we're, like understand what's going on inside ourselves, because the more stuff that we can figure out for ourselves, the less stuff we have to put on our kids. you know
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. For me, I feel like my heart just softened and I became like just love, just unconditional love for my daughter. And also like a sort of source of protection. Like I don't want anything bad to happen to this person ever and ever. I don't want her to have any kind of misery in her life. And then also like this fear of like, oh man, I hope I don't screw her up. Like honestly, I hope I don't do something that just like, I don't want her to see me like in a bad spot, you know what I mean? And I think that's something that I worry about. And also like, can I do it? Am I a good dad? I mean, and I sort of kind of how I'm kind of doing it is, I mean, minute by minute. And my wife is a very good mom, and I'm really, really grateful for her. And I am. I really, she's the best mom I possibly could think of for to raise Emerson. And but at the same time, it's like reading her books. I know she's like not necessarily getting it at this point, but I get something out of it, and maybe she gets something out of it too. But I think it's just all this stuff that's happening right now at 9 months. I know that it's just going to amplify as things go on, and it's definitely it's tough for me. I'll be honest with you. It's not easy, but I love it and it's rewarding and it's given me a sense of purpose. And I think you're right, Sasha, about this idea of like the whole the whole that meaning, that's something that you wanting to find some sort of meaning. And I think it is something beautiful about being able to give life first off, like it's and to have someone that unconditionally you should love and protect as much as possible. And also I've and kind of, I don't know, veer them from the path that maybe you were brought up in. You know what I mean? Like some of the stuff that you learned, that you can unlearn for them, or your doubts, maybe you can turn your doubts into positives for them, kind of soul search to make them better. I don't know if I'm making that point right. I just feel like, I don't know. And that's kind of what happened for me. And also, it's just things are more interesting now. Things are more interesting, and it's not necessarily about me. It's about her. I don't know if you feel that way about your kids.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that like there are different traps. There's all kinds of different traps we can fall in. There's that trap where you're like, oh, I don't want anything terrible to happen to this kid, so I'm going to do whatever I can to make sure nothing bad happens to that kid. That can be a real trap.
That's a
You know?
trap. That's an absolute trap. That's 100% of a trap.
That's like, then there's the thing for years. So I mean, I'm 48 years old. So like I had a lot of years there as an adult where I didn't have kids. And I would see all the time with my friends who had kids, they would just disappear or they would stop caring about like whatever we'd be working together on trying to make the world better somehow. And then they'd be like
Yeah.
off doing their family thing and it would seem like they didn't care anymore. And I understand the perspective now in a way I didn't. And at the same time, I think there is a way that we can care about our own kids and use that as a way to not care about other people's kids. And so I'm really interested in how do we how do we care about other people's kids at the same time that we care about our own kids?
Well, I think that that's a really interesting point. And when I'm gonna say something about Oddball Foundation for a second, take off my Oddball show, Oddball Foundation, president of Oddball Foundation. When we were creating the mission, someone I spoke to, my mentor was like, "What would you want to see for the world if Oddball Foundation was a success?" And I think in that kind of vein, I'm just gonna say like that was the idea, right? We could take off that Oddball Foundation hat and now put Oddball Show podcast Jason back on. And the point is, what I'm getting at is, I remember meeting this one person who said, great guy, his name is CCR Shagar, and he said to me, "What would you like to see for the children tomorrow?" And I mean, in the work that we do, Sasha, right? I mean, aren't we kind of paving the way of change for maybe people looking at people and humanity in like a different way for the kids of tomorrow? And isn't that a way kind of, isn't that kind of the win of what we're doing? Like that's the point of, even from back when you were creating the Icarus project and things like that, you had this idea of reshaping the idea of how people think about, even bipolar disorder. And now we have this whole idea of reshaping how people think about mental health in general. And that it is, for me, I always think of the brain body connection and trauma and how it's related, and not necessarily how it has anything to do with some sort of chemical balance or something that's innately wrong with you. And if we can kind of impart that to our children at a young age or something, or just in general, or kind of teach them with that kind of view to look at, I mean, wouldn't that be kind of the win of what we're doing as, people who are trying to be major change agents in the world?
Well, I think it's all like I'm always interested in the stories of people like someone like Artie Lang. I don't know if you know who he was. He was a Scottish psychiatrist in the 60s. But like that guy had like all these, really intense critiques of the family system and how it made people crazy or whatever. But then you listen to interviews with his kids and they're like, yeah, he was totally abusive. My dad was an asshole. And I think about stuff like that because I do stuff in the public realm. I like proclaim, like we need to change the way the society thinks about mental health and mental illness. But at the heart of it, like, yeah, I want my family unit to be healthy. I want my kids to be supported. I was raised in a really toxic environment where I had two parents who really hated each other, and that created a lot of conflict. I mean, you want to talk about bipolar disorder? Yeah, there's some like chemical, biological thing going on there, but I think the biggest part of my bipolar disorder was that I had these two like, warring parents, and then I was like a little island in the Cold War that was getting battled over. Um, so I feel like it starts with us and our own internal families. I mean, a lot of the work that I do these days is I'm really inspired by internal family systems therapy. But I think it's about our own internal work and then and then like work with family and then work with like the larger community and institutions that we're a part of. And then it works its way out. It's like it's very fractal like, what's going on with us, our fingerprints, are like the same patterns as the galaxies that we live in, and it's just like patterns. I learned that from reading Adrienne Maree Brown, Emergent Strategy, like the idea that whatever it is that we're doing, whatever it is that we practice, that's going to ripple out and have its effect. So if, whatever you're practicing in your relationships, yeah, you may profess to be doing some really awesome shit with the Oddball Foundation or whatever, but like really it's about like how you're treating people and how you relating to people like on the day to day, like your relationship with your kid. So
Yeah, well, that's 100% how. That's a really good point, you know. And one thing I want to say is I was very excited when you started talking about internal family systems, and I thought because I learned about it recently, and I first of all, there was more stuff to unpack there about like how what you do in private you are awarded for publicly. I don't even know if that's true anymore, that you are awarded for what you do in private publicly. Maybe you are, but also um that's what they say, whatever you practice in private you're awarded for publicly. But I guess it goes the same way, if Artie Lang's kids said he was toxic and everything, and although he seemed to have a great kind of major impact on psychiatry and almost like this peer movement in a way. And I would say, talking about what I know about Artie Lang, and I always think of Artie Lang, then I always think of Artie Lang. I always put the two, I'm talking about Artie Lang, the comedian, and then Artie Lang, the social scientist, the psychiatrist. Um, so I always think of both of them. But what I know of Artie Lang, the psychiatrist, is from a video that I saw where he was talking to someone with lived experience about the being generally curious about someone and their voices and stuff like that, and how that influenced psychiatry in that way. But the one thing I did want to talk about was go back to internal family systems and maybe have a discussion about that, because I find it fascinating. And I've talked to some people who don't know about internal family systems, and I found that it's been very helpful in some parts of my own I don't want to call it recovery at this point, but where I'm at in life once I learned about internal family systems, and not from Bessel van der Kolk and that idea of the body keeps the score, which I absolutely 100% believe, but the idea that you can talk to your body and make friends with the parts that you hate about yourself, and thank them for being with you, and for some reason like that helps. I don't know, what do you think it is about internal family systems that's like effective? Because I found it very effective so far, what I know about it.
um well, I think that it can be useful to think about ourselves as individuals, that can be helpful, to think about ourselves as like being single individuals. But it can also be really helpful to think about ourselves as having multiple parts, that having multiple parts of ourselves that have relationships with each other. So um, there's a lot of human behavior that seems like it doesn't make sense when you look at it through the lens of, okay, we're just all, individuals. But then when you realize that we have multiple things going on at the same time, other stuff comes into view. I mean, the thing for me about talking about internal family systems is that because the people that I'm most interested in are the ones who end up getting diagnosed with what's called like serious or mental illness or severe and persistent mental illness, um, I think it's useful to go back to the origins of where internal family systems came from. Uh, so there's this idea of systemic thinking or systems thinking that in the 1960s and 1970s was really popular. Um, and the discipline of family therapy was really influenced by it. So in the 1960s and 70s, like it was a very popular idea that if you had a family of people, if one of those people in the family was diagnosed with schizophrenia, instead of seeing that as like some biological illness, it was seen as a manifestation of something that was happening in the family, like that the psychosis or the madness was like a, something. It was a family dynamic, and that idea, like a lot of people were talking like that in the 60s and 70s. There's Gregory Bateson, he had that whole double blind theory of schizophrenia. There was like all kinds of uh, all kinds of ways that stuff was really popular. And then in the 1980s, with the rise of biopsychiatry, those ideas are really crushed out of the popular consciousness, like so much so that like it sounds alien at this point. And most people in the society that we live in, at least now here in 2023, like when we're recording this, they think of schizophrenia as a biological brain disease. They think of it as something that's like you're born with it, it's genetic, it's like it's just like some stroke of unluck that happens or whatever. So internal family systems has those roots. It's a systems thinking. It like looks at what's going on, um, like in the outside world, but then it takes it and then it brings it onto the inside and says like, okay, everybody has a bunch of different parts, the same way a family would have different parts. And so, and this is like the really critical piece, Jason. So like hold on to this if you want to understand IFS. In the IFS model, everyone has a self, and that self is fundamentally curious and compassionate and creative and courageous. And that part is like there, we're born with it. Your little girl just has that inherently. She's got it, right? And then what happens as we get older and we get socialized, and oh, we have to be potty trained, and oh, we have to all these maybe there's trauma that comes along with it. Maybe like there we like these different parts come along. We have to figure out how to fit into society. That self, that curious, compassionate, creative, courageous self gets covered up and we don't have it anymore. It's still there, but we don't have access to it in the same way. So if you're an IFS therapist, your job is to have access to yourself, to figure out how to get access to it, and then to find your client's self and bring it out. And once you can do that a little bit, you find something you're curious about. You find you like you have some compassion for yourself, then you can notice your different parts. And there's a couple different parts in the IFS framework, right? So there's you can say there's two different kinds of parts. There's protector parts and there's exile parts. And our exile parts are like the little kid parts that are freaked out, that have trauma from the past and that are hiding and like buried in us. And then our protector parts are trying to keep our system together and keep it healthy. And protector parts, they have two different kinds in this model. They have managers and they have firefighters. And manager parts are the parts that like get us to do the things we have to do every day and like get us to be able to like go to work and whatever and be able to like function. And then firefighter parts are the parts that are like, I can't deal with this at all, so I'm just gonna smoke some weed. Or I can't deal with this at all, so I'm just gonna drink. Or you know what? I can't deal, so I'm just gonna like check out and like scroll on my phone for hours and not pay attention to the shit that I have to do or whatever. And these parts like have relationships with each other. And so if you're an IFS practitioner, what you do is you become like a parts detector. You're talking and you notice people's parts as they're talking, and then you build some relationship with self, and then you basically have conversations. You try and build self to part relationships, because that's what you want. You want to know, you want to understand your parts, not just like intellectually. You want to be able to like be like, oh, there's this part of me that gets really uncomfortable when we start talking about I don't know, money or something. Or there's this part of me that gets really uncomfortable when I have to whatever. I'm like trying to be, in a relationship with someone, and like they're bringing something up, and this part of me like shuts down. Oh, that's a part of me that does that. Oh, how can I how can I be compassionate? How can I be curious and compassionate enough to help that part be like step back a little, give enough space.
Yeah, yeah.
Like so that's the idea. That's like the basic idea of IFS. But the reason I tell you could tell the story in a bunch of different ways. I tell the story bringing it back to systemic family therapy because I think it's important to talk about it in the context of like, yeah, this isn't just some technique. This isn't just some like, oh, I can talk to my body and it'll talk back to me. It's like this is a different way of thinking about what it means to be a human being, and it can be
Yeah.
really.
Yeah, I think it's a brilliant method. And when my therapist brought it up to me, I had some unresolved some stuff that I experienced that I had to speak to. I actually had to like connect to it and talk to it and thank you for spending some time with me and all that kind of stuff. And if you take that, my Alexa just wanted to say hi for a second. So if you take that approach with the idea that trauma exists in the body, I feel like that's like a really great approach to talking about mental illness, quote unquote, because I think that that's all relative, the brain body connection. Let me ask you, like, not a loaded question, but I'm going to ask you a question real quick. It's not loaded, but it's just a kind of like a question. Do you think there's such thing as a chemical balance, Sasha Altman de Bruyne?
Do I think that there's such a thing as a
Thing is
chemical
chemical
balance?
balance in the body that causes mental illness.
Uh, no. There you go. There's my answer.
Okay.
I didn't. I mean, it's like, look, are we speaking in metaphors here? Or are we speaking? It
No,
sounds like you're trying to get
there's
me to say like that, like.
there's a big part of the population outside of people who aren't who don't understand the brain body connection or that trauma is related to your experience, that people think that innately your chemicals are off if you are if there's something going on with you that equates to a mental illness. And I think that the more people who say, look, that's bullshit, the more the more that the idea is going to be like, look, there's this chemical balance thing is a metaphor. This is because literally that wasn't that the idea originally, but people grabbed onto it and said, this is mental illness. Mental illness is a chemical imbalance.
Yeah. I mean, I every night before I go to sleep, I take 900 milligrams of lithium carbonate, which is a psychiatric drug that regulates the ion exchange in my brain,
Mm-hmm.
right? And
Mm-hmm.
lithium is heavier than sodium. And so when the ion exchange is taking place in my brain, like it my it basically slows my brain down a little bit. I've been taking lithium carbonate for 22 years, and I find that it's like it's really helpful. It keeps me grounded in a way that I haven't found anything else that keeps me grounded. Does that mean that I like had a chemical imbalance in my brain? No, I mean, but I mean, is there something about the way that my brain works that like lithium works well with it? Yeah, I mean, but
Yeah.
I don't know. So that complexifies it.
I think so too. And when I think about like the way my brain works, the way my brain works, Sasha, is that I'm an idea person. I came up with Oddball Foundation. I came up with Oddball Show. Came up with Oddball Magazine. I'm an idea guy, right? I think about things all the time. I come up with things and stuff, and my brain works in like an octopus, like all sorts of different ways. Does that mean that I'm mentally ill, or am I creative? But is that a pathology? Like I don't know.
Well, it
I don't
depends
know.
on, I think a lot of it really depends on like how much access to resources and other people that you have, Like it seems like I don't know your background, but it seems like you are a white man who's educated and obviously has some access to some money somehow. And so people like manage to you met like you figured out what you needed to figure out in a way that is if you were raised in a different way, you probably yeah, you would be considered chronically mentally ill
Hmm.
and you wouldn't have no oddball foundation. Like that.
Well, I mean, I just think that like, when I think about these kind of things, I think we pathologize people who can sometimes be creatively gifted or can be like maybe they are, I hate to use these words like depressed or schizophrenic or whatever these words that people use, but maybe they're also creating these brilliant works of art or Pink Floyd. I don't know, because like Sid Barrett, he had schizophrenia. That's what the story is about. He created Pink Floyd. So like,
Yeah,
if
yeah.
someone like Sid Barrett, what if Sid Barrett was not Sid Barrett? Would Pink Floyd exist? So you gotta think about these kind of things. Like there is madness in art, and art and madness, and why do they have to be somewhat pathologized? And I guess that's kind of like where I'm going with that. Like, why does
Yeah,
art have
like
to be
I just
pathologized?
I might disagree with you though, in that I feel like there's there's some level on which, of course, like is it what's getting pathologized? Like people love creativity, people love brilliance. The it's the stuff that comes along with it that, like, actually, do you want to spend time around someone who's in some like really intense creative process and is like super narcissistic because they're not thinking about the other people around them, like, you know
Yeah,
the
right,
like that like I don't think everyone wants there to be like the brilliance. No, everyone, Pink Floyd is like they're like where everyone's psyched about it. They don't want their friend to be, you know, suicidal and like having to take care of them.
right,
That's
right.
like so. I mean, I pointed out the fact that, like, I think that on some level there is a certain amount that, like, there's some people who just like struggle no matter what, but I think there's a certain amount of privilege that like keeps people from having to struggle or for having to get a label, and
Yeah.
then I think on top of it, like, the society that we live in, there's such a legacy of um genocide and
Oh, sure.
oppression and like just like unspoken about things that like end up like causing so much like inner turmoil for people, and they think it's about, it's put on the individual rather than seeing it as some larger systemic thing or societal thing. So I think that the individual oddball who just manages to be like creative and brilliant, like, people love those people. I'm sure people love you, like that. You're not like you're doing fine. I'm doing fine. Like, I'm as
Yeah.
long as I don't fucking lose my shit and like, like
Well, that's the thing, Sasha. If How can you keep someone who you think who is, might be a gifted artist or something, who is starting to get into that realm of like, holy shit, this person's unmanageable. In your opinion, how do you keep them from, I mean, flying too close to the sun? Kind of like, like, how do you keep them? How can you maintain a relationship with someone? And I think that goes to these all ideas of like, how can you have these difficult conversations when someone is, how can you help someone who is, might be, in this case, like, for like, we're using like an artist or something who is like a Brian Wilson type, like he's creating pet sounds, and people are like, what are you doing? How could you keep that guy, um that person, that artist, that person in that space away from harm? I guess, how can you keep that person, how can you maintain that conversation without like saying this guy's too much, or this person's too much, I can't handle them, or they're chaotic and it's causing me chaos? How do you do that? Is it just a thing that you just
that's my
learn?
job, man. That's what I do. That's what, yeah, you asked the right person. I mean, like that, I mean, so for many years, my friends and I ran this organization called the Icarus Project. That was a network of peer-based mental health support groups. And one of the tools that we developed in the community was based originally on something called a RAP plan, or Wellness Recovery Action Plan, which was basically like a written document that you make in the event that you're having a hard time.
Right.
So when you're doing all right, you get together with your people and you write down, what does it look like when I'm doing well? What does it look like when I'm struggling? What are the things I need to do to take care of myself? Who are the important people in my life that I need to talk to about it? And you
Yeah.
have that stuff written down, and it becomes like something to work with. And then we took that and we evolved it in a particular direction where we were like, yeah, it's one thing to talk about like individual mental health and mental illness, but we're living in this larger society. Can we have conversations about, like, well, what does it look like when society's well? What does it
Yeah.
look like when, society is unhealthy?
Now,
Um,
is that what transformative mutual aid practices is? And
yeah, yeah.
would
So
you
so
say?
TMAPS is like is like the, 2023 version of what Mad Maps was for the Icarus project. And at the heart of it is what I was talking about before, this idea of systemic thinking. This, at the heart of it is this idea of internal family systems. Like, in order, it's this idea of mutual aid is the idea that like people can support each other, right? That we don't need to necessarily like have some institution from the outside come and support us. We like people figure out ways to support each other. But I don't know if you've like noticed this in your life. I've definitely noticed it in mine, that it can be really hard to both support other people and get support ourselves if we don't know ourselves well enough to know what it is that we need, you
Right.
know? It's like a huge piece of it. So you were saying a few moments ago, what do you do when there's a person who's like, you know, freaking out and, like causing so much chaos in their lives? Well, being able to have conversations about what are those freak outs about? Is it biological mental illness? Is it a chemical imbalance, as you're
Right. Right.
saying,
Right.
or are there like tangible things, like why is it that I get so upset when you mention, whatever, like that's what therapy is about, man. If you find someone that you can talk to and be able to build a relationship with your internal world, there's a real power in that. And
Yeah.
like I personally am less interested in the kind of therapy that's more like a cognitive behavioral therapy where we're trying to figure out like, okay, how do we deal with our the how can I function in the system without freaking out. I want to go a little deeper than that. I want to understand like why, and like get to know the different parts of myself, and build relationships with them. And at the heart of it is this understanding that fundamentally we're like everyone is good. I mean, I think that there's something in our society, like we're raised to think that actually like no, there's bad evil people out there, and that there's bad and evilness and I need to like get rid of it. And one of the teachings of IFS is this idea of there's no bad parts. They just
Yeah.
like relationships that like need restructuring, and that
Yeah.
there's a kind of that there's an internal leadership that's really important. Like we need to learn how to lead from the part of ourselves that is curious and compassionate and creative and courageous, and that the way to learn how to do that is to spend time with another person who's doing it and
Yeah.
who can model it. So
Mentoring. Mentoring.
yeah,
Mentoring. Right.
yeah, it's really it's a process of mentoring, and I think like so when I started TMAPS, when I first was using that language of transformative mutual aid practices, I was thinking about um, relationships between people. How can we build kind of community support structures? And the more I went on with it, I was like, actually, our relationships with our own parts are really important. Like, how do we like our oftentimes we have parts inside of ourselves. I'm not talking now about like that, like the outside world or, or even
How
like a
about
family.
internally? Right.
I'm talking about internally. We have parts that don't talk to each other, that have like learned like not to communicate with each other. And if they were to listen to each other, it's kind of like um it's like intermediation, you have to kind of learn to like mediate the different parts.
So like doing something more different than just like, hey, like your part's here and hanging out with it and asking it questions and thanking it for being, but like bringing out another part and having that conversation with like two parts of yourself at the same time. Is that kind of what you're saying? Like,
Or even more. I mean, the way that the technique, the way you do it, if you're an IFS therapist, is you find a part that you want to work on. You want to, and then you engage. So you're like, someone decides, okay, I want to work on this part that's like really angry with my mom, or where whatever,
right,
and
right,
then
right.
and then and then you ask the question. This is like one of these like key questions in IFS. Okay, well, how are you feeling towards that part that's angry with your mom? You know? And then the person sits and thinks and they go, you know what? I'm really angry at that part. Like I'm really actually that part's like gotten me into a lot of trouble. And then you go, aha, well, that is another part. So like let's let's focus on that part, and like and then you do it again, you're like, okay, well, we've talked to that part. Can that part step aside? Now let's check in again. How do you feel towards this part of yourself that's so angry with your mother or whatever, And then you some other part comes up, but you do it eventually, and eventually you get down to this place that you're like, I'm actually really curious about that part. I'm really, I feel a lot of compassion for that part. And then you go, aha, we've reached the
Is
self.
that another part? Is the compassionate part another part, or is that's the self? Okay,
The
because that's your
self.
compassion. Your compassion is compassion, caring, curious, and caring,
Oh, courageousness,
courageous.
confidence, creative, clarity,
So,
like
Sasha, TMAPS. How does an agency get involved with TMAPS? How do we implement that? How does it become your idea to multiple agencies' ideas, that it actually becomes a thing that peers use as a tool? And maybe I'm just, this is already a thing that's being used and I'm not aware of it. But how do people who want to learn more about transferable mutual aid practices and bring it to like their agency or their recovery center or their whatever it is, how do they do that? How do you bring it there?
so I have two answers for you. And the first answer is they go to tmapscommunity.net. So tmapscommunity.net. And they'll find a website that me and Jax McNamara made, the person I started the Icarus Project with. And there's a bunch of information. When I was training peer workers in the mental health system, we developed a 5-section training, um, and people use it. But then the other answer is they reach out to me. They come and find me, and we have a conversation about it.
Oh,
It's
that's
a
awesome.
Yeah.
Oh, very cool. Sasha, I want to talk briefly about IDA and what you are working on with IDA, and what is IDA for people who aren't aware of IDA. I mean, we already kind of talked about transformative mutual aid practices. I mean, people might not even know what internal family systems is. Maybe they should just look it up before they talk to us about this.
Yeah. They should look up IFS. Yeah, okay. I'm looking at
But
the clock, and I'm
I
realizing
know we
we
got
have like
3
2 minutes.
minutos. So what's going on with IDA?
All right. So IDA stands for the Institute for the Development of Human Arts, and it's a training institute for mental health workers to teach practices that can help transform the mental health system. And the way that we started the way that we started it, there was like a crew of us that were working on it. And just to be clear, I don't work for IDA. I just work with them.
You work with
But
IDA, right?
work with IDA. Um, IDA's like, grew out of the Icarus project. But the the idea is basically like, you know, there's all these conversations that aren't happening in the mental health system because people are scared to talk about their own lived experience with mental health issues.
Yeah.
And so we make sure that the people who are teaching with IDA, that there's always people who like have like are open about their own lived experience with mental health issues and not just talking as some kind of academic. So yeah, go to idha-nyc.org and you can learn more about it.
And finally, with the 1 minute we have left before you have to go be a dad, what is your blog? Tell us about your blog. I get it
Oh,
now. I enjoy it.
I have two Substack blogs that I post on weekly. And one is called it's like Dad of Lila and Silas. And it's just like I write about being a dad. And then the other one is called Underground Transmissions, and I post about my mental health work on there. So
Love
yeah,
it.
come check
And
it
can
out.
I ask you one last question? We have 1 minute left. What book would you recommend, and what are you reading right now?
Oh, well, I would really recommend to anyone who is interested, like whose like interest is piqued by this internal family systems thing, just read like the Introduction to Internal Family Systems that was written by Richard Schwartz. I mean, it's like a very readable, short book that's like the basics of the IFS system. Um, And I don't know, man. I mean, I'm a therapist, so like it's like what's sitting right in front of me right now. I'm reading a book called Understanding and Treating Chronic Shame, a relational neurobiological approach. But like that's the kind of shit I like to read.
That'll be in the show notes, I guess. Sasha, I really appreciate you coming on the show. I really do have a lot of fun talking to you. Congratulations on being a dad.
Yeah, you too, man.
You're
too.
21. You're 21 months. You're 11, 12 months ahead of me. I don't know, but it's a real journey, and I hope I see you real soon and talk more. And yeah, let's connect again, Sasha. Thank you for being on Oddball Show. It's been a pleasure. You can find out, Sasha, are you on Instagram or anything that people can like?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram. I'm Sasha _ TMAPS.
All right. And if you thank you for being on the show, Sasha. I really do appreciate you taking your time, and tell your kids thank you from Oddball Show
right.
for letting Dad come on the show. Okay, bye.
Bye.
So this has been the Oddball Show. Had a great conversation with Sasha Altman de Breuil. I like him a lot. I wish we could talk more. I feel like he has a lot of wisdom that he imparts very, very in like little, like just like finite. His words are very chosen very well, I think, and mine are not. Mine are kind of like blah. But anyway, regardless, I really did appreciate talking to Sasha Altman de Breuil. So I have some time. So let me talk a little bit about Sasha Altman de Breuil's stuff. First of all, you got Maps to the Other Side. This is how I first learned about him. You can learn about him with the Icarus Project and stuff that he did with the Icarus Project. You can check out TMAPS and transformative mutual aid practices. We talked a lot about IFS. The book No Bad Parts is definitely a book that I've read a little bit of. It has a lot of practices in it, so it kind of slows you down. Sometimes I like books that like less practices, more reading. But then again, I've been having a little bit of difficulty reading in general. And what else? Maps to the Other Side. Check out IDA. Check out Transformative Mutual Aid Practices. And yeah, so this has been Oddball Show. My name is Jason Wright. I really do appreciate you listening to this show. If you like what you heard, please leave a review. I do appreciate Sasha coming on the show. I do appreciate my listeners listening. I hope you got something from Sasha. I'd love to speak to you more, but I also have to take care of my daughter, Emerson. So everyone, please have a good day, night, evening, afternoon, wherever you're at. Be well to each other, and please read a book. This has been Jason Wright. This has been The Oddball Show. Talk to you real soon, and be well, everyone. See you later.
If you liked what you heard in this episode, learned something new, and want to stay up to date on what's going on with Oddball Show, please consider liking this episode and leaving a review. Subscribe to Oddball Show on YouTube, Buzzsprout, or wherever you get your podcasts. And check out oddballmagazine.org for more fascinating stories, poetry, and art. Thanks for listening.